D and Davis, the show, and we are lucky enough today, me, D, and Ryan, to be joined by an old pal.
Yes.
We've been doing this together for a minute. He's one of the brothers that's been down with us when we first really got in this, and it was reciprocated back. He's here in Chicago taking over, and he's in New York half the time. Where does this man live at? The only thing slowing him down is the COVID. And that is Scoop B, Brandon Robinson. You can always catch his articles at heavy.com. And also, he's the host of Scoop B Radio and the founder of Scoop B Radio. He does anything sports, but in particularly the NBA. How you doing tonight, Scoop?
I'm chilling, guys, and COVID ain't stopping me. COVID is afraid of my phone and what we can do with that. So
I hear you.
Always good to talk to you guys, though.
That's what's
Hey,
up.
Scoop, let me just go off straight to the NBA. And what are some of the precautions that you've heard the NBA ask of NBA players as far as moving forward and how to handle themselves with the virus being so rampant here with the pandemic in America?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just watching the company that you keep and who you monitor in and out, with the whole socially distant thing, 6 to 8 feet. But what I find interesting in this whole situation is particularly Rudy Gobert, for example, who is from France. And during, sometime between January and when the leagues had the stoppage, he had friends or family reportedly around. House. And so you think about everybody that's hung out with everybody in the last 2 months. You think about All-Star Weekend. You think about, Christmas holiday. You think about all those things. I think it's just monitoring the amount of, people you're around and, shaking hands and hugging. Like, that's hard in basketball where there's constantly, you're seeing fans, you're shaking people's hands, you've played AAU basketball with people. Like, there's relationship. That's what basketball is. So, they're just telling a lot of players just to be mindful of the company they keep and just touching.
Look, let me ask you this. About 3 months ago, turn of the year, maybe not even that, maybe 2, I remember hearing that a league executive kind of floated out there about starting the NBA season on Christmas, citing that usually, fans aren't really getting geared up until the games around Christmas. And if it's just baseball in the summertime, why not overlap over baseball since basketball is a much more dominant, not much more, but it's a more prevalent sport, especially with the younger crowd, than baseball is. Do you think that we're going to actually see that one because of the fact that maybe they'll come back and have to push back next season? Or do you think that may just stay and that they may start the season later because this gives them an opportunity to implement something that may be a cash cow for them in the future?
Ideally, I think it's a novel idea, particularly because it's been done back in 2011 season when the lockout, shortened season. Prevented there from being an all-star game and or just, play. You started on Christmas Day. You had all these games. Derrick Rose had a miracle against the Lakers some years ago. I was writing about that the other day. But when you look at the situation, I think that fans don't begin to start paying attention to basketball till around playoff time, after the NCAA tournament is over, and then also after the Super Bowl. The week after, you got all these primetime Saturday games. I think it would be a novel idea based upon what I have heard around the league. There is talk of, potentially, I heard it through the grapevine, that they're considering, anywhere between June and August of restarting the season, and it'd literally be 6 to 8 regular season games, and then you'd go into the playoffs. So, if you're, the Lakers in first place in the Western Conference, or you're the Memphis Grizzlies in the 8th seed, to quote the great DJ Khaled, your bag is secure. You're the Portland Trailblazers or the New Orleans Pelicans on the outside looking in, 6 to 8 games is disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt. D and Davis show right here. Brandon Robinson on the line on a video and line with us if you want to say. Make sure you follow Brandon on Twitter at ScoopB and also to ScoopBRadio.com. Brandon, you're in the know. You're talking to players all the time. Just give us their perspective about what's going on right now, how they're feeling, they're dealing with their families, and eventually even getting back onto the court.
I think it's an interesting dichotomy. I think family is something that is a gift and a curse in the fact that some players, they may live in a separate city or state from where their families are. Or you have situations where you have kids, you have all that stuff taken care of with, the mother of their children, and then you either are away because you can't get out, or you're stuck at the house and you're trying to train, and you get out of practice from everything that you've put in during the summertime. I use this perfect example. LeBron James talked about on the Road Tripping podcast how his body's like, bro, what is going on? You think about it. Over the summer, he taped Space Jam. He worked out. He was preparing for this potential championship season. And he still found a way at 35 to jump as high as he did his first few years in Cleveland, create, chemistry with Anthony Davis and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and what have you. And then there's the stoppage. That routine kind of gets to you, and it's interesting. I have a podcast with Kenny Anderson that will probably drop this weekend. I asked him to compare the coronavirus pandemic now to when the NBA lockout season happened in the 90s. And he talked about how conditioning was a big thing and how he was not disciplined, he wasn't focused. Now, granted, we weren't in a pandemic then, and really it was just a collective bargaining agreement issue. But when you talk to past players, that's what they closely dial in on. Just the fact that there was no place for them to work out other than home. And things were a lot different then. Now you have personal chefs, trainers around the clock, more money as well. So it's a little different. But, you talk to taking a look around my phone and just asking guys, what's the biggest thing? For some of them, they're preparing for their next act in careers. CJ McCollum has been taking meetings and things of that sort. You look at Jamal Crawford, who's still an NBA free agent. He and I talk almost every other day, and he lives in Washington State, so he's got kids that he's taking care of with his wife, as well as trying to get a workout in, and they're home, so they're taking classes online. It's an added dimension to what's going on right now.
Have you heard from any players that say, you know what, let's go ahead and call this season of Washington start up next season?
I've spoken to a few players who feel that way. They think that the season is done. It's about a 50-50 split. I've spoken to players who feel like the season is done. I've spoken to some players where they say, let's salvage the season. Let's try to make something of it. And then you have conversations like, I go back to the lockout, where it's like, okay, say hypothetically, right? Say the Clippers or the Lakers win. Then you start having those conversations like they had with the Spurs when they beat the Knicks in the 99 finals, where it's like there's an asterisk next to the name. And the 90s were in a very different situation than the Lakers. In my opinion, I think the Lakers have a 2 to 3 year window, and really it begins to get tougher next year because you have a healthy Golden State Warriors team next season. There's a potential opportunity. There's discussions around the league that, Giannis Antetokounmpo, if he were to leave the Milwaukee Bucks, he could land in a Miami Heat organization, or he could land in a Golden State Warriors organization. He could even potentially land in a Lakers organization if Anthony Davis doesn't resign this summer. So, this was the year for certain teams to fulfill certain obligations and certain desires for people, but I think this season is a lot different because you didn't know who was going to really go to the finals, who was going to go to the conference finals. And, players have just really expressed their displeasure, with that. So it's interesting.
Dean Davis, right now we have Brandon Scoop B. Robinson on with us. Brandon, real quick, get back to one thing. And you mentioned when the Spurs won in 98. And at first, I can remember even Charles Barkley saying that team had an asterisk on it until they went on to have a dynasty. And it was proven that they were a great team. But I have a question. And it kind of goes back around Rudy Gobert, the Celtics, the Raptors, the teams that played Utah prior to everyone finding out that Gobert and Donovan Mitchell had coronavirus. Has anybody expressed how worried they are that they passed it to their families and the frustration perhaps? And I don't want to go back and go at Rudy Gobert, but the frustration at one, how he was acting flippant with it, but the risks that they may have come in contact with, I don't want to say the NBA wasn't doing what they were supposed to, but people necessarily weren't taking the precautions, and some people may have caught this, and they may not be right moving forward. Has any player expressed that and how that is really important to them and frustration with the league or any other player or any other team?
I haven't spoken to any player specifically about that, but this is what I will say just from kind of covering it, having conversations, and piecing it together, right? So for those who are paying attention, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, tested positive during a 10 to 12 games or 10 to 12 day span. You've played the Pistons, you've played the Celtics, you've played the Raptors, the Cavaliers, etc. You think of road trips and you think of just who played who and who was around who. The Pistons, someone on the Pistons contracted it, Christian Wood. The Jazz played, the Pistons recently. You look at the Boston Celtics, who they played. Marcus Smart contracted it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers, for example. You look at gentlemen on the Nets. I believe it was 4 gentlemen. One who was Kevin Durant who contracted it. And the Lakers, they have not publicly disclosed who had it. I think that it really makes you, it's almost like, I can't use any other comparison but this. It makes you think of like when you're having conversations with friends about partners that you've had in the past. It's like, but wait, this happened. We played this team. We played that team. Like, it really makes you sit and think like how quickly and how much people interact with one another and how you just don't know. So like, I'll give you a personal example. Like, the week that the week that the Pistons were in New York, I was supposed to sit down with a member of the Pistons that Monday. I got a call that Sunday. They canceled it. I will credit the NBA in this sense. I think the NBA, when they made a move, other people kind of followed.
Yeah.
Schools followed. The NCAA followed. I remember sitting on a conference call with Charles Barkley, and Charles Barkley didn't understand why fans kind of had to be punished. And, and then later that week, he had to get tested himself and tested negative, of course, from all published reports. But I think in this time, more than anything, I think this is the new normal, and we're figuring out still, is it shaking hands? Is it hugging? Is it droplets? Is it sexually transmitted? Like, I remember having a conversation with Gary Vitti, former Lakers trainer, on the Scoopy Radio podcast, and him detailing how he took his gloves off when he treated Magic Johnson because he tested as HIV positive, not comparing COVID-19 and AIDS. But I find it interesting that there's nothing new under the sun, and some of the same conversations that we're having about something that people are not necessarily educated on, and we're learning a lot of things on the fly. I find that this is the new thing that is not just sports; it is life. It transcends so many different facets of life. So I think I went in a tangent and answered your question, but I think it's a case study in just how we are reimagining everything.
One, you can't get it if you're not kissing and you're having sex. So for everybody that's having COVID sex, just don't kiss if you ain't been around that person. But listen,
but protect yourself.
You brought that too. But listen, 2 things real quick before D chimes back in that you mentioned. One, what was your fear from you were here at All-Star? Did you at first, were you worried that you contracted it? And you mentioned that this is a new normal moving forward. What type of changes do you think when the bell cow is flattened out, but still we know it's probably going to come back in the fall and in the wintertime? How do you think you're going to move to avoid catching COVID when the season starts back up and you got to be moving all around the country?
So I made that reference to partners in a sense. I've thought about where I've been from January, comparatively from January to March. Mm-hmm. I've been around members of between January and March. I've been around members of the Nets. I've been around members of the Lakers. I've been around a couple people who were diagnosed who tested positive. So was I worried about it? No, because I think the time frame, like I look at the time frame from after All-Star to now. Because it seemed like many people were testing positive for it after that. You weren't hearing much about it. As it relates to how it's affected my job specifically, being in and out of locker rooms, I worried about access for people and whether this is an excuse for them to not let people in in the future. And what I'll say is, it's even interesting looking at pictures where you're around people before the new normal and what it is now. Steve Smith, who's on Turner, his birthday was the other day, and I had tweeted, happy birthday to him. It was a picture. And his former Atlanta Hawks teammate, Eldridge Rukowski, quote tweeted and said, "Hey, Scoop, hey, Smitty, y'all ain't 6 to 8 feet. Back up." He was joking. But it's like you really have to – it reminds me of what life was like before TSA only allowed passengers to go into the area where
right.
Versus
Very true. Very true.
watch Home Alone, and the whole family was sitting in the room waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's just very interesting to kind of dissect.
Do you think the NBA is? I mean, as you said before, Scoop, and this is Brandon Scoop B. Robinson on the D and Davis show right now. Make sure you follow Brandon on Twitter at Scoop B. Brandon, do you think that the NBA will go that far? Because we asked our buddy Tony, who's down at Anthony Gill, who's down at NBC Sports Chicago. He said the NBA is a very progressive, forward-leaning industry and league. But do you think they will probably try to maneuver some kind of way into kind of like restricting certain media and to make this new normal the normal?
I think it depends on what happens as far as the virus. The thing that I think about more specifically is handshaking, fans in stands, hugs. I think particularly Ryan is included too, but particularly people of color and people in media. We hug, we touch, we talk. Like, it's a very close up situation. Basketball is predominantly black. Guys slap hands and butts. I never understood the butt part, but it's like if you're so in close proximity, it's almost like, why didn't we think of this before? Why are people talking about washing their hands now? Shouldn't you been always washing your hands?
Yeah.
Why are you washing and scrubbing? I think that the new norm is still being defined. And I think the fact that nobody is around each other in close quarters, and it's just so new. Like, are we going to be in a situation where, like, okay, if we're media people or we're players, like, do we have like little guards on our hands that we have to change every game so that it makes you safe? Then you think about like the Michael Jordan flu game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, many people applaud Michael Jordan for how many points he scored, how he was able to overcome what he overcame. But he was touching the basketball, and so was everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if anybody else got sick after that game years ago. So, do you clean the balls after every game?
I hope they were doing it already.
Yeah. They probably wasn't, though.
But I mean, that's the thing. What about touching the ball? So when it comes back, it's going to go through the NBA. Like, how are you going to do it if I was touching the ball in every sport, basically, now moving forward?
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know is legit. Like, I don't know. I just think that it seems so simple yet so complex. Like, even from a perspective, I was talking to a contact of mine in LA a couple of days ago. LA has a smog problem. I went up to Hollywood Hills during one of my trips over the past year and just looked at the sky and the smog and looked at like a before picture, like sometime in December or November of 2019, and then an after picture of now. I think that, we watch, I was just telling my roommate this the other day, we watch so much Captain Planet going up about protecting the earth, like water and heart and all the things we need to not mess up the sky and not mess up what's going on. And it's like, that was actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, the smog is like night and day in LA right now because people are more home than not. I think that as much as it's a pandemic, I think this is a space of self-reflection, goals, how we treat each other, how we spend our money, how we invest. Like, there's so many facets that this is going to affect aside from just sports.
Look, that Captain Planet reference, and you said heart. Matisse Power was whack. Heart was like, who wants the heart?
Man, you remember their names?
It's like, I got Earth. It was like, heart. It was like, Matisse, get your ass out of here.
Hey, Brandon, well, give us a lowdown too. You're up in New York, man. How was it up there? That's really right now the epicenter of
Yeah.
the coronavirus here in the States, at least, but also obviously, as we all know, it's spreading across the country. But give us a lowdown on what's going on up there in New York.
Well, I'll tell you what, I live in New Jersey and in New York as well. My family a lot of my family is still there and they're not coming out. I mean, we're talking everything from Lower Manhattan, where some of my friends and family work. It's a ghost town. Midtown is a ghost town. When do you know Times Square to have no people populated? And then I've seen some of my friends like joyride on their IG stories on and just passing through. And it's like, if you don't take your behind home,
Yeah,
it's having an effect on finances. It's having an effect on culture. It's having an effect on events. Like I'll tell you that there are things that I know there's a lot of money that I have friends that are missing out on, whether it's working a regular 9 to 5, whether it's they're in TV or radio and there's production. But I think what's interesting is I think at this point, as much as money matters, it doesn't. I think people are realizing that mouse running through a paper bag rat race that we're in sometimes can affect your own health, and people are just reimagining, what's important and what's actually important. So, you're not seeing a lot of people home. I fear for those who are unhappily in relationships or marriage or who have lots of kids. I think they stocked up on all types of boxed wine and vodka. But more than anything else, man, it's a ghost town. And I think, as it's continuing to spread, I think that both Governor Phil Murphy in New Jersey as well as Governor Cuomo in New York have done a good job in just advising people on how to move and how to shake. And I think that they're setting the standard for how other states should follow suit. I think those two governors have done a good job in their level of leadership. But it's been a ghost town.
I hate to ask, but can you speak to the level of fear? Like Chicago, New Orleans are two of the places that are said to be the epicenters after New York. And you look and listen, Cuomo is basically now everybody's governor. It's funny. I was talking to an old lady and she was like, "Did you see Pritzker?" I was like, "I only watch Cuomo's. I don't watch Pritzker's. I watch Cuomo's." All right. But still, like, there's so many people dying there. Like, you got parents. Like, what's the level of fear of people that this bug could just wipe you out? And again, as you said, it's Times Square is empty, and we know how New Yorkers are. If this got them scared in the house, it speaks to how fearful people are of contracting this COVID-19.
My parents, they're in their 60s, and my mom and my stepdad, they've been buying groceries in excess. Like the first floor has groceries for now, and downstairs has like groceries for the next month. Because it's expected that it's a chance we really, really can't even step foot in our house, outside of our house. There's a belief that we're being slow walked, that eventually martial law could happen, and that people if you continue not to follow the rules and keep stepping outside your house and not following the rules, that you're going to be made. And it's interesting because it reminds me, it's not a direct comparison, but it reminds me of when the National Guard took over the city of Philadelphia. I went to school in that area, and I remember taking classes at night at Community College of Philadelphia. I believe it was like 2006, 2007 when the homicide rate was high in the city of Philadelphia. And like the National Guard was like, there was an 8 or 9 o'clock curfew. And, I took night class. I was scurrying to get back to my place. And, it reminds me of that, just the level of curfew, get in your house, do what you need to do. And I think, it's there's going to be a lot of babies named Essential come December and January. But I think at the same time, I just think people are still figuring out a lot of what's going on. Forget the money. It's more about people's health, and it seems to be just spreading rapidly.
Yeah, Scoop, before we get up out of here, man, I got to get your thoughts on the NBA and the 2K Players Only League. You covered the 2K events, obviously, for the NBA. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a placeholder until they figure out what's going on. I think it's great that they're doing something for charity. And I also think it's good for someone like Donovan Mitchell to get some type of exposure and to kind of have conversation about it, because I think we're still learning what happens next. Same for Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant is more naturally either spoken, guarded, or just don't care. I said Kevin Durant, right? Not Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
You said Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Kevin Durant. Yeah, KD, yeah.
because I wrote that in an article earlier. I meant Kevin. I've been doing it, like, right, Kevin Garnett.
It happens. I do that too sometimes.
I think even someone like Boogie Cousins, who, is not playing right now, he has the chance to kind of just have an outlet. I think, people look at players as just like sometimes as robots, and, these guys have opinions, they have personalities and more, and, you get to hear their voices. There are some players who publicly don't want to talk right now because they just don't want to be that guy to say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So these competitions where you have live and you have, different, today on my Instagram live, I had wrestler Mark Henry on. We talked for about a good hour. WrestleMania this week, and he was very candid about a lot. I think this gives guys an outlet to be themselves because they can't be on the court.
Listen, you were real close to Kyrie Irving, we all know. About 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, Kenny Atkinson was relieved of his coaching duties. How much of that was Kyrie and KD from what you know, and how much was that with just management not seeing eye to eye with the direction the coach was taking the team?
People you ask say that if KD and Kyrie wanted him there, he would still be there. Mm-hmm. I know that Brooklyn has a short window in the next 3 years to win something. I could tell you that there is a desire on some players named Irving who may want somebody named Phil Handy.
Okay.
Coaching capacity with the Brooklyn Nets. But there are other candidates out there. You look at Mark Jackson. You look at even Greg Popovich, who is in an interesting situation in San Antonio. He has the opportunity to pass the torch on to
Tim Duncan,
or to Tim Duncan, and there are other candidates out there. The Van Gundy's is going to always be a name that's thrown out there. I'd like to see Mark Jackson get a coaching job. I was with Mark Jackson a couple of months ago at the Lakers-Sixers game in Philadelphia, and he told me he's doing good. He's staying ready. He's grinding, and it would be cool to see that, particularly because he's an alum of Bishop Loughlin High School, which is minutes away from the Barclays Center. And it will be a great homecoming of sorts. But I think that the Nets are the Popovich thing sounds interesting only because, Sean Marks, the GM of the Brooklyn Nets, comes from the San Antonio Spurs tree. And it'll be interesting to see. I also think that, hey, Jacque Vaughn is undefeated. He's 2-0 since taking over for Kenny Atkinson. They beat the Bulls and they beat the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers
it ain't that hard to beat the Bulls.
Former Utah Jazz Jacque Vaughn. Oh, that Jackie Vaughn.
but Kyrie Irving does have a respect for Jacque Vaughn. That he was an assistant coach on the team for a while, so there's a relationship there. But I think Jacque Vaughn is in a similar situation in Brooklyn that Mike Miller is in with the crosstown with the New York Knicks. I think Vaughn is in a better position potentially to get rehired, but I think the Nets are looking for some type of splash, and Phil Handy may check some of those boxes, and what Popovich could do, and Mark Jackson will always be an option.
Real quick before we get out of here, because you mentioned that people in this industry and people that aren't getting to the bag, as far as even if you're not in media, but people are getting fired, unfortunately, or being let go. Here in Chicago at 670 Score, Julie DeCaro, Connor McKnight, and Rick Camp. So we want to send them our best thoughts. And I got on this shirt right here, White Sox, for Ed Farmer, a White Sox former pitcher and radio announcer. We're sending our best wishes to his family. Also, Scoop, 10 seconds real quick. What you got coming out before we get up out of here?
A lot. I pre-recorded a lot of interviews for Scoopy Radio that will be making moves. We had Shaq on a couple of weeks ago, Jamal Crawford on this week. We have interviews with entrepreneurs, and we've got some NBA writers, NBA writers and NBA players. I'll share with you, I was on the phone with Jason Williams, a retired NBA player, this morning. A lot of people coming through in the next couple of weeks.
That's what's up. Hey, Brandon, man, thank you so much for hopping on with us, man. Definitely doing a video with us too, man. We'll get it out to everybody soon, and you take care. You be safe, man.
Yes, sir.
Definitely, man. We'll see you, Scoop. Everybody be safe.
Amen.
All right, D and Davis Show.